Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we are continuing on with Punk's Not Dead, and we are doing chapter 11. Katsuki and Kirishima's final tutoring session, which Kirishima of course didn't know was their final tutoring session, didn't actually involve a lot of studying. It mostly consisted of Kirishima badly masking his nerves while asking Katsuki about the wedding plans, with half-assed attempts to throw math in whenever Kirishima thought he'd asked too many questions in a row. It was, to put things mildly, exhausting. Mostly because Katsuki didn't want to think about the wedding until around 3 the next day, which was when they were supposed to get there. It seemed to help Kirishima though, so Katsuki dealt with it until they pulled up in front of Katsuki's house. "So, I'll see you tomorrow?" Kirishima asked.
"I should fucking hope so,"
Katsuki grumbled, and Kirishima laughed, a nervous, forced sound that Katsuki instantly hated. He understood why Kirishima was nervous. Monday had already been hard on him, and tomorrow was going to be more of the same, but from Katsuki's entire extended family. Right. He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, and part of Katsuki wanted to reach out and grab his hand so he'd stop. "You're sure you want me to drive?"
"I sure as fuck don't want to be stuck in a car with my parents. I know where the venue is, we'll be fine."
Kirishima huffed out a sigh, and his fingers stilled. Katsuki still wanted to hold his hands. "All right."
"I expect you to look fucking obnoxious tomorrow,"
Katsuki said, snagging his bag from the back seat and climbing out of the car before he did something he'd regret. "I'll do my best," Kirishima laughed. A real laugh. One that didn't make Katsuki feel like someone was dragging their nails down his spine. Katsuki allowed himself a quick half-smile before slamming the door and making his way up to the house. "Katsuki!" his mother yelled as soon as he opened the door to the house. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" Katsuki rolled his eyes. Ready. He had to wear a fucking suit and show up. It wasn't exactly a goddamn challenge.
"Yeah,"
he called back, kicking off his shoes and heading up to his room before his mother could bombard him with more inane questions. As soon as he dropped his bag, however, he remembered that he did actually have something to do. Nothing that would really affect his mother, so she didn't have to know about it, but still. He had a final bullet point to cross off. Katsuki found Kirishima's hoodie fairly easily, buried in the tangle of his covers and sheets on his bed, because he may or may not have been sleeping in it for the past few days. As he collected laundry from around the room to make a load, then made his way to the laundry room, he was hit with an abrupt wave of déjà vu. Although luckily his dad wasn't around this time, he stayed in the laundry room through the entire washing cycle, sitting on the floor and wishing he could go back to that point before he liked Kirishima, or before he realized that he liked Kirishima. He'd take either at that point. Eventually, the washing machine made its annoying, cheery ending chime, and Katsuki moved the load to the dryer. It felt a little too pathetic to sit in the laundry room when he didn't have the excuse of needing to move his clothes before they got mildewy. So he left the dryer to do its work, and he went to bed. If he didn't fall asleep for another 2 hours, well, no one fucking knew but him. Time passes. At exactly 2 p.m. the next afternoon, there was a knock on the door of the Bakugou household. Katsuki, because he wasn't a fucking idiot, had been lingering by the landing since 11, and he made it to the door first. When he opened the door, he was greeted by the sight of Kirishima, with his stupid hair spikes and bruised-up nose, wearing a goddamn suit. Which, yes, was kind of a thing at weddings, and Katsuki should definitely have been more prepared for it, but as it stood, he just kind of froze for a second, staring. There was no way the suit was rented. It fit him perfectly, and his tie matched his hair, and when the actual fuck had this moron developed a fashion sense, it was ridiculous. "Shit, did I spill something on it?" Kirishima asked, looking down at himself, and of course, he would take Katsuki unabashedly staring at him as a sign that he'd fucked up somehow, because Katsuki had gone and fallen in love with a fucking moron. "I tried to be careful, but I was really hungry."
You're fucking fine.
Katsuki snapped, pulling Kirishima inside before he could embarrass himself further.
Where the hell did you get your suit?
Sayuri teaches at this really fancy private school, and one year she got accused of lying about having a family, so we all got dragged out to their annual fundraising gala, Kirishima explained, which Katsuki had to admit definitely wasn't the answer he'd been expecting.
It's nice,
Katsuki's mouth said without consulting his brain first. Yours too, Kirishima responded instantly, grinning. Katsuki stared at him for a moment, not sure whether he should be relieved that he hadn't been caught or calling Kirishima an idiot. He settled on a solid middle ground of,
thanks, my mom designed it.
As if she'd been summoned, his mother appeared from deeper in the house, fighting with one of her earrings while she railed on Katsuki's father for something. When did he get here? She demanded as soon as she set eyes on Kirishima.
About 3 seconds ago, relax.
She didn't push it, which Katsuki felt spoke volumes about how on edge she was. One of the few joys of family gatherings was watching his mother be just as miserable as him for a few hours. There's a problem with Megami's dress, so we're going now. If you and Kirishima aren't there by 3, I'll have your head. Got it? Katsuki rolled his eyes.
It's a 20-minute drive, and he's already here. We aren't going to shame the family.
His mother finally got her earring in and used her now free hand to clock him on the back of the head. Scoot, brat, we need the door. Katsuki took Kirishima's arm and pulled him into the living room until his parents were out of the house. Kirishima looked like he wanted to say something, frowning and worrying his bottom lip with his teeth. Does she do that a lot? Kirishima finally asked, right as Katsuki was about to snap and demand to know what had him thinking so damn hard.
Do what?
Hit you, Kirishima said, brow still furrowed.
Shit, sometimes. It's not like I fucking keep count,
Katsuki replied.
I'm used to it.
That's kind of worse, actually, Kirishima said, then winced, like he hadn't meant to voice that particular thought out loud. Katsuki didn't really have an answer to that, so he pushed Kirishima towards the door with a mumbled,
Let's just go.
Kirishima still seemed kind of unnerved about the whole situation, but he didn't press it, and immediately handed over the aux cord when they got into the car. So Katsuki let the whole incident become horrifically awkward water under the bridge while he directed Kirishima out of the suburbs towards the wedding venue. They didn't talk much beyond Katsuki giving instructions, but it was fairly painless, and they managed to get to the pavilion where the reception was being held with minimal difficulty. Parking was another matter entirely because Katsuki's entire extended family was here and the lot was designed to hold a maximum of 50 cars. Dude, Kirishima said once they'd finally managed to snag a space almost a street away. Your family seriously does not fuck around when it comes to weddings.
It's because they're all petty as shit,
Katsuki snorted.
Our second cousin twice removed doesn't get an invite and no one hears the end of it.
So, I know you said this is your cousin's wedding, but are we talking an actual cousin, or?
Actual cousin. My mom's sister's daughter.
Kirishima nodded and looked like he wanted to ask another question. But before he could, they were accosted by a group of relatives, whose names Katsuki couldn't be asked to remember. We told you to bring a date, Katsuki, not a friend, probably one of his uncles said, clapping him hard on the shoulder. Katsuki grit his teeth. They were starting early.
He is my date,
he said, linking his pinky with Kirishima's and lifting their joined hands for the group to see. One woman gasped, and the probably uncle who touched his shoulder took a very unsubtle step back. Kirishima gave a small wave with his free hand, and even though he was smiling, his discomfort was clear.
Come on,
Katsuki said, pulling him along before the group could recover from their shock. The family gossip chain was a powerful thing, and Katsuki had no doubt that by the time the ceremony started, the shock would be gone and the raw hostility would be in its place. But that was a problem they'd get to later. For now, he and Kirishima found their seats for the ceremony at the very back with the rest of the kids, who ranged from 6 to 23, in the field behind the pavilion in direct fucking sunlight. Even Katsuki, who ran cold at the best of times, was starting to sweat through his dress shirt. But even though there was no way Kirishima, a human heater in all-black suit with a jacket, wasn't absolutely freaking miserable, he was well enough to make shitty comments. Dude, like a solid half of the people here look like weird clones of you, Kirishima said, and Katsuki kicked him in the shin. Hey, you can't get angry if it's true.
I'll be as angry as I damn well please,
Katsuki snarled, turning on his phone to check the time. 2:45. They had another 15 minutes of waiting, minimum. While he was trying to decide whether it was worth picking a fight with one of his relatives just so he could have something to do instead of sitting still and roasting, he heard a strident cry of, "Katsuki, what?" Nagai Hibaka, 5 foot even, 78 years of age and the bane of Katsuki's existence, burst into the center aisle and started scanning the chairs for him. "Did your mom age 30 years in the past hour?" Kirishima whispered, and Katsuki had to bring a hand to his mouth to muffle his laughter. Unfortunately, his grandmother had the hearing of a woman half her age, and as soon as a sound had left his mouth, she rounded on him, marching over with the kind of enraged gleam in her eye that would have made lesser men weep. As it was, Kirishima reached for Katsuki's hand immediately, almost automatically, which was kind of a lot for Katsuki to deal with right then. "On your feet!" his grandmother snapped, and Katsuki obeyed, rolling his eyes and pulling Kirishima up with him. "I didn't expect this from you, Katsuki," she said, looking Kirishima up and down with a disapproving sneer. "You were always one of the smarter ones."
The heart wants what it wants,
Katsuki said dryly. Kirishima managed to turn his laugh into a cough, but Katsuki's grandmother's eyes narrowed at him anyway. "Do you find my disgracing grandson funny?" "No, ma'am," Kirishima replied, although he was still very clearly fighting back a smile. Without warning, Katsuki's grandmother lunged forward and grabbed Kirishima by the chin, prying his mouth open so she could get a better look at his teeth.
"What the fuck do you think you're doing?"
Katsuki demanded, stepping between the two and forcing his grandmother to let go. "Who taught you language like that?"
"Your fucking daughter, hag,"
Katsuki yelled. He normally tried to avoid pissing off his grandmother when he could, solely because he was liable to turn the whole family against him and lose a sizable inheritance. But he was so beyond giving a shit at this point. His grandmother's eyes sharpened. "You're defending him over family?"
"Every fucking chance I get,"
Katsuki replied, and his grandmother pinched his cheek, vicious and remorseless. "You won't be given a second chance to take that back, brat."
"I don't want one."
"I think the ceremony's starting," Kirishima said, laying a hand on Katsuki's shoulder and gently guiding him back to his seat. His grandmother stalked off without so much as a word of parting. It took Katsuki a few minutes to calm his breathing, at which point he noticed that the ceremony had not, in fact, started yet, beyond the music that began playing in the background.
"Did you lie to the hag?"
"No! This started playing while you two were arguing. I didn't realize how long it was." Katsuki snorted, and, in an uncharacteristic show of weakness because the past few minutes had been draining as hell, dropped some of his weight onto Kirishima.
"I'm not complaining, dipshit."
Kirishima smiled down at him and adjusted his position a bit so Katsuki didn't have the armrest digging into him. They stayed in that position even when the ceremony itself started, because even if Megami was one of his less annoying cousins, that didn't mean Katsuki cared about how she met her fiancé. Kirishima, on the other hand, apparently paid attention because Katsuki caught him tearing up during their vows.
"Oh my god, seriously?" he hissed. "You don't even know these people."
"Shut up," Kirishima retorted, but the words lacked bite, since he looked like he was about to cry. "It's still sweet." Katsuki rolled his eyes, then went back to completely ignoring the proceedings. He only realized he'd dozed off when Kirishima shook him awake. "Rise and shine, we've got more homophobes to annoy." Katsuki moved just enough to plant a kiss on Kirishima's jaw, the only part of him he could really reach, before pulling away to stretch properly. What was that for? Kirishima said, hand clamped over the spot Katsuki had just kissed. He was blushing. Katsuki raised an eyebrow.
We okayed cheek kissing.
This is different, Kirishima hissed insistently.
What happened to pissing off homophobes?
Kirishima tried to argue the point during their walk to the pavilion, but he eventually gave up once they were faced with the gauntlet of Katsuki's relatives. They dealt with a lot of inappropriate questions and passive-aggressive comments until they encountered Katsuki's little cousins, who mostly wanted to touch Kirishima's hair, and once they'd determined that he was amenable, play hide-and-seek with him. Katsuki let him be dragged off since being harassed by the gremlin horde was probably significantly more fun than dealing with the adults, which was what Katsuki ended up doing. It was almost freeing, since now he'd pissed off his grandmother, he could be as much of an asshole as he wanted with zero circumstances. It did mean he had to physically fight off one of his aunts when food was served and she tried to prevent him from accessing the buffet table, but he managed to make off with food for both him and Kirishima, who found him shortly after. He fell on his dinner like a starving man, and Katsuki let him. He'd been dealing with his cousins for years, and he knew it was a full workout at the best of times. While Kirishima was eating, Katsuki noticed his grandmother eyeing him from the other side of the room. The dance floor had been set up and active for well over an hour. She glared, so her glare was continuously interrupted by people moving across it, but that didn't seem to deter her in the slightest. Eventually, Kirishima looked up and noticed her as well. After a few seconds of deliberation, he set his jaw, put aside his plate, stepping in front of Katsuki so he was blocking his grandmother's view. "Let's dance," he said, a steely glint in his eye. He probably wanted to piss off the old bat as much as Katsuki did after meeting her. That hadn't even occurred to Katsuki, probably because he had some survival instincts, and they'd carefully blocked off any thought paths that ended with him slow dancing with Kirishima. But now that the idea was out there, he had to admit it was a good one.
You any good?
I mean, I can't, waltz, but I probably won't step on your feet if we do the whole stand and sway thing, Kirishima replied, smiling and scratching awkwardly at the back of his neck. It would do. Katsuki took Kirishima by the elbow and pulled him onto the dance floor. For a moment, they just kind of stood there, not touching beyond Katsuki's hand on Kirishima's arm, unsure what to do. Katsuki eventually forced himself to loop his arms behind Kirishima's neck. The bastard was taller than him, so it was the logical move, even though every ounce of self-preservation had him screaming at him to do anything else. And Kirishima got the memo, taking a small step forward and placing his hands on Katsuki's waist. By the time they were done arranging themselves, they were nose to nose. You could kiss him, a horrible, traitorous part of Katsuki's brain said. He moved his face so it was buried in the juncture between Kirishima's neck and shoulder, which still looked appropriately coupley without making Katsuki want to scream. Or, made him want to scream less, because he could feel Kirishima's pulse against his cheek and fucking smell him, and it was just a lot. She's pissed, Kirishima said softly after a few seconds, and Katsuki grinned. Kirishima must have felt it because his breathing hitched slightly. Katsuki pulled back enough to look at Kirishima and asked, "Ticklish?" "Yeah, a bit," Kirishima said with a small laugh.
"Weak,"
Katsuki responded, going back to the previous position while Kirishima cackled outright. They kept up the bare minimum dancing a while longer until somebody suddenly knocked into Kirishima's back, sending them both stumbling.
"Asshole,"
Katsuki called after the fast-retreating and unidentifiable figure fleeing the scene.
"You okay?"
"Yeah, I'm fine," Kirishima said, grimacing as he shrugs out of his jacket. "Spilled something on me, though." Katsuki nodded towards the bathroom, and they headed over together. It was a single stall, which was terrible design for a pavilion with a 600-person capacity, but the architect wasn't there for Katsuki to yell at, so he just loitered against the wall while he waited for Kirishima to finish up. He was contemplating taking out his phone when he heard someone yelling his name. "Katsuki!" Katsuki sighed. He hated being one of the little cousins, mostly because he wasn't old enough to drink, and most of the other relatives were, and did, sometimes in excess, as was evident by the very drunk Megami dragging her husband over to him.
What the fuck do you want?
She flicked him in the forehead. You're not allowed to be mean to me at my wedding after you caused all that drama. Especially because I want to tell you a secret. Oh, fucking hell. Katsuki sighed deeply and ran a hand over his face.
I don't care about your secrets, Megami.
You're gonna like this one, she said, sing-song, before leaning into his ear and drunkenly whispering. Hiro and I didn't meet in class. We met at my college's GSA. We're both bi. She pulled away, giggling maniacally, and her husband took over, supporting most of her weight. You can't tell anyone until Grandma Hibika kicks it, though. You might be okay giving up your inheritance, but I'm draining that crotchety bitch dry. Hiro tried to shush her, but she waved him off. It's so nice to know I'm not alone, though, and your boyfriend's so sweet. He complimented my dress.
It's your fucking wedding, Megami. Everyone's complimenting your dress.
Damn right they are, she cried, spinning in place and nearly falling over again. Hiro once again caught her. He shot Katsuki an apologetic smile and a subtle thumbs up, then led his wife away, hopefully to get some water in her before she threw up all over her dress. Katsuki's mother had designed it, and he'd never hear the end of it if it ended up ruined. Kirishima emerged from the bathroom a few minutes later, holding his suit jacket.
Let's go home,
Katsuki said. Won't your mom be pissed? It's only like 8 o'clock. Katsuki shrugged.
She'll be pissed no matter what, and I did what I came to do. I'm done.
Fair enough, Kirishima said, swinging his jacket over his arm and offering the other to Katsuki like some kind of Regency gentleman. Katsuki accepted it with a sigh and a shake of his head, and they snuck out of the nearest door and ran all the way to the car. 20 minutes later, they were pulling into Katsuki's driveway, and Katsuki had finally realized the unfortunate consequence of leaving the wedding earlier than planned, which was having to talk with Kirishima earlier. Kirishima insisted on walking him to the door, which was, all things considered, probably for the best. Katsuki was still kind of giddy from the run and the act of getting away, and the slight chill of the evening air brought him back down to the level of sobriety he needed for this conversation. When they got to the door, they stood facing each other for a moment, and they both started talking at the same time. Bakugou, Kirishima laughed and gave Katsuki a small, genuine smile. You first. This was the best way, Katsuki told himself. How his family had acted tonight and how his mom had acted on Monday. None of that was ever going to go away. And even though Kirishima had put his stupid brave face and powered through both times, Katsuki couldn't ask him to do that forever. He had to make a clean break for both their sakes. Cut Kirishima out of his life completely before he did something stupid, and ask him to stay, for real this time.
I'll be back in a second,
Katsuki said.
I need to grab something inside.
Kirishima looked confused, but he nodded and let Katsuki leave anyway. When Katsuki made it through the front door, the sweater was exactly where he'd left it, folded up on the kitchen counter with a piece of paper on top of it. He grabbed both before going back outside and shoving them at Kirishima. What's this? Kirishima asked, frowning at the bundle in his hands before picking the piece of paper off the hoodie and unfolding it.
Deku's phone number.
Kirishima let out a short laugh. Midoriya, I thought you hated him.
Well, I do, but even I can admit he's a smart little shit, and he'd probably be a good tutor.
Katsuki watched as Kirishima's expression went from confused to hurt as he realized what Katsuki was saying. Oh, he said, shoving the paper into his pocket and quickly looking away. Yeah, okay, He gestured over his shoulder at his car and started to back away. He was blinking hard. See you. Never mind. Bye. He turned around and rushed off after that. Katsuki hunched his shoulders and stared at his shoes until he heard Kirishima's car leave the driveway. He tried very hard to pretend he didn't feel the tears rolling down his cheeks. All right, friends, thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. I know this one did not end off on a very happy note, but we have one left. So I hope that after this chapter, you will come back and join me for that last chapter, and we can find out how this fic ends together. All right, see you next time.